Hi guys, happy Monday. Let me flip my screen. Forgot to do that. I'm going to show you something that you'll want to read. All right, we're good. Okay, so typically I have been doing the small business shout outs. This per se is not a small business. I would, probably a large business, I don't know. But a lot of you guys asked me questions about the science curriculum when I posted her science report last week. So I just wanted to show you the books that we did, that we're doing. I'll link them up above if you want to order them slightly cheaper than normal. And when you're hopping on, drop me down and let me know, are you a homeschool mom or are you not a homeschool mom? And if you are a homeschool mom, drop me down. Are you homeschooling just because of what's happening in the country? Like, are you doing an e-learning system, or have you been like homeschooling for the whole time? Because I honestly do feel you guys who are just jumping on the homeschool wagon because you have to, I feel like you have it harder than those of us who chose to a long time ago. We chose it, we prepared for it, like mentally, financially, physically, all of it, because you do prepare. And those of you who are just kind of thrown into it, I feel like you didn't have any of that preparation season. It was just like, oh, by the way, you're a homeschooler. Yay. So I will say, like, I feel for you guys. And I know you guys are killing it. You're doing everything that you possibly can, but I don't envy you at all. Like, I have mad respect for those of y'all who are doing it. Not necessarily because you wanted to, but you're just thrown into it and you're rolling with it. This is good. This is a good curriculum to use if you are just homeschooling for a season and you're wanting a little extra as well. So it's just the Evan Moore lesson and investigations, grade 1 is what we're using. And then we are using the centers as well, which just are basically hands-on activities that go along with the book. So the center we just finished is on living or not living, and she just made a little book. So it literally shows the difference like between living and non-living things. She had a section of living that she colored the different items, glued them on. Then she had a section where she wrote the living and not living. Where am I? It's so hard doing this backwards. Living and not living. And then she colored everything and she X'd out the stuff that was not living, I believe. Yeah, you can't see it because it's pencil. And then wrote down what 3 things all living things have in common. And then the last 2 pages are just the non-living things from the same page. So very hands-on, very fun, and just reinforced what we had already learned in the actual workbook. So I like them. I think they do a very good job relating to kinesthetic learners, but you still have the auditory part because you're reading and you're going through vocabulary, which you still have the textbook part because once your kid's old enough, they can do that themselves. Or again, you're still just conveying knowledge from the book to the child. And then my mind is blank. I need some coffee because I can't think of the other one. But anyways, it really does a good job for getting the point across to all the different learning types, which is something I like because I do think children should, yes, they have a primary learning type. My daughter's kinesthetic. But if you can get them used to learning using all the learning types, then as they're older, they're just a lot more well-rounded when it comes to job interviews. And if they decide to go to college, most people aren't going to cater to their specific learning type. So anyways. So that looks fun. I would want to do it. Yeah, actually, it's funny because I'm in a lot of homeschool groups and I'll post different activities that we do and I'll have moms be like, can you homeschool me? Like, where were you when I was a kid? Trust me, I wish I had me as a teacher when I was a kid. I'm not saying that to be boastful. I spent tens of thousands of dollars on a teaching degree and all I do is use it for my child and for my job. Like I teach, but I teach adults. So it's different. I'm not teaching like core subjects. I literally just teach how to make money on Facebook and Instagram. So I teach how to monetize social media, which is fun, but it's all online. So it's not like I don't get to do fun little projects with the students, you know? So this is kind of how I channel that inner teacher that I love so much into my own daughter. So paid a lot of money to be able to put little turtle books together, okay? But it's fun. I love it. So we're going to talk, this is episode 3. If you've missed any of the episodes, you can check out my YouTube channel. I will link that up here as well. And I have episode 0, 1, and 2. Episode 0 is just the introduction to the 5 love languages of kids and how to kind of like what the overview of this course is. Episode 1, I'll be honest, I don't even remember. I don't remember the title. I should have looked it up. I believe it was just talking a little bit about what the different love languages are. And then last week was episode 2, and that was really just talking about why you need to learn to love in all 5 languages and what it's going to do for your child later on. So the next several lessons are lessons, episodes, whatever. I guess I should have called these lesson 1, lesson 2 instead of episode. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But this is going to be going through each different love language, how to use it properly, and then the safeguards that you need to put up, because the day that we live in, sometimes some of these, if you are using them with other children, you do have to have safeguards. That's the world we live in. Physical touch is an appropriate one to talk about first when in regards to safeguards, because there are just things that you have to be mindful of. Put it that way. We don't live in the world that we did even when I was a kid. So touch is something that a lot of parents are actually uncomfortable with, especially once their kid reaches a certain age. And you see it more often in the opposite gender. So dads are more often uncomfortable with the physical touch side with their daughters. And I don't want to even say teenagers, because I've talked to a lot of dads when I studied the first time I read this book. Before I was a parent, I talked to a lot of parents. And there were a lot of dads that when their kids reached 7, 8, 9, 10, that's when the uncomfortableness hit. It wasn't even just teenagers. And then girls or women are more uncomfortable with the touchy-feely side when it comes to their boys, not because of anything that they deem inappropriate. They don't want to sissify them. They don't want to turn them girly. And that's a complete myth. Boys who are not loved physically when they're a kid, and I'm not saying you don't love your kid, I'm saying through physical touch, they're the ones that grow up and they have a hard time loving their wife and loving their daughters through physical touch. So again, that's where last week we talked about loving through all 5 love languages. Touch is a huge one of those that lacks in a lot of homes. And again, I don't think it's because of like they purposely don't love their kids. I think it's just the one that's usually the most uncomfortable. I know it was for my husband. It's one we had to talk about a lot because he is not a touchy-feely person. My daughter's love language is touch. So we've had to talk multiple times, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But and then I will say, in a world where sexual abuse, I don't know if it happens more than it used to, or if it's just talked about more, like we're more aware and we're more educated. I don't honestly know I don't really believe that it happens more. I think it's just we're more educated on it. There's just a lot more stigmatism around it, I guess, with the physical touch side with anybody's kids, but even your own. So I'm going to go through the different age groups and what the appropriate level of like touchy-feely is with those, and so just some ideas that you can use if you're not a touchy-feely person. It's not just walking up and giving your kid a hug or giving your kid a kiss. And I do understand. I don't know that I empathize with it because I'm not a man, but I understand like walking up and just grabbing your 17-year-old daughter and planting one on her cheek, like how that could be uncomfortable for some men, especially if you grew up in a household that touch was not a big part of your love languages. So I understand it, and that's where this is going to kind of come into play. So infants and toddlers, I think that's the easiest age group, right, to do touch because they're like cute little babies. So hugs and kisses are obviously huge. Little boys and little girls, but little boys love to do this. How many times do you see a dad wrestling on the floor with their little boy? I didn't think about it before, but that is giving that little boy so much physical touch when it comes to the love side of things. And again, girls too. I'm not saying not girls. I just know my daughter, she may wrestle a little bit, but that's like not her main thing of wanting to do when it comes to physical touch. She's a cuddler. She loves to sit on laps and watch TV and read books. Reading a story on their, like with your kid in your lap, that's another huge one when they're that age. And studies show, and again, we talked about this a little bit, but that boys are touched less than girls for the pure reason that parents don't want to sissify their boys. And again, that's a myth, guys. Hugging and kissing your little boy is not going to harm his masculinity. If anything, it's going to make him grow up to be a better father and a better husband than abstaining from that. And there's a few things that you can do also, just like rubbing their back or books at bedtime. Like, even if you have a friend of mine, I won't mention her on here because I didn't ask if I could. Her little boy is very, very rambunctious, like high energy all the time. But at night, he loves to sit and cuddle and read bedtime stories and fall asleep with mom. So they like to have that physical touch, and they do still crave it. They just may not in the middle of the day when they're wanting to run around at 100 miles an hour. Then you move on to school age kids. So one thing my daughter likes to do, she would be considered school age. She's in first grade. She likes to cuddle. She likes to have that like hugging time first thing in the morning. Now, if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I live and die by the motto of get up and get stuff done before your kids get out of bed. Easier said than done when you have a kid like mine who likes to get up at like 5:30 in the morning. So typically, I'm up by 4:30, 5 o'clock at the latest. That's what I strive for, and definitely not that I'm perfect. Anyone that knows me personally knows. They know when I don't text them back and it's like 9 o'clock, I'm like, oh, I don't even know how I slept in so late, but such is life. I'm working on it. So when she comes out, and I do my journaling and my devotion first thing in the morning. So when she comes out at 5:30, 6 o'clock, I'm either finishing up my devotions or I'm still in the middle of them, depending on like what I'm reading and how much I'm studying. I don't really want to stop and have cuddle time, okay? Just gonna be honest. But that's something she needs, and it's something all of our kids need. They need, when they are showing physical affection or any kind of affection. And I'm not saying you stop what you're doing every time your kid wants you. But first thing in the morning, that is a crucial time, just like the last thing at night. I stop what I'm doing, and we have a little bit of cuddle time. It may only be 5 minutes, but she knows that she is more important than whatever I'm doing. She's more important than me reading my Bible. She's more important than me doing a Zoom with my team, if that's what I'm doing. She's more important than whatever self-development book I'm reading. Like, she is more important than the tasks on my to-do list. And that speaks volumes to a child. They're not going to tell you that. They're not verbally going to be like, Mom, thank you so much for loving me and showing me that I'm more important than your self-development book. It fills my cup so much. No 6-year-old's going to say that, right? But it means a lot to them. Now, also during this age, between 7, 8, 9, 10, your kid's going to resist the lovey-dovey, especially, can you guess? In public. Now, I think my daughter's going to be lower on that spectrum because she's a lovey-dovey person. But some of y'all's kids, like, they don't want nothing to do with you in front of their friends when it comes to hugging and kissing and cuddling and all that stuff. So that's when you get creative. And again, things like wrestling. Kids love that. And now, this is where the safeguards come into play. Because if you're a teacher, physical touch, I don't even know what the rules actually are, but I'm assuming they're like very, very limited. I know even just when we were teaching at the church, like, there wasn't a lot of physical touch. And that's fine. Rules are there for a reason. I follow by them. But me, for example, I'm just going to use a story of mine. We have a few families that routinely, their kids will come over for days, if not weeks at a time, during school hours. So they're very close with us. My daughter is very close with their parents. We are a lot more like family to those kids than we are like teachers. And I remember one specific instance, very, very beginning of a little boy coming over, where the girls were at the table doing phonics. He didn't have phonics. We were working on some kind of alphabet with him. So I was on the floor in the living room, and we were playing like a card game. I like to make teaching fun. So I know he's rambunctious. I know he has a lot of energy. A lot of his lessons we turn into games on purpose. Because at this point, he wasn't even in school yet. He was learning the skills, but he wasn't used to like sitting in a school setting. So I'm on the floor, and we're doing cards, and all of a sudden, he just jumps on my back and he's going to wrestle with me. And at first, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I don't know. And then I was like, no, there's nothing weird about that. Like, he's a little boy. He likes to wrestle. And again, because we are like family, it wasn't weird. Now, I wouldn't have done that in a classroom full of 30 kids that I don't know their parents, have dinner at their dinner table. You understand? Like, you do have to put up the safeguards. But that's a way that he was showing me that he loved me, even though to me, I wasn't that used to it because my daughter doesn't do that. And it was something that, the same with my daughter. she likes to sit and read. She likes to sit and snuggle with someone as they're watching TV. If she's at their house and their dad is sitting and watching TV with them and they're all cuddled up on the couch, I'm not going to think anything of my daughter doing the same thing. There's nothing wrong about it. Again, because we're so educated about sexual abuse, we also tend to over-sexualize a lot of things. And again, I'm not saying you don't put safeguards up. You have to do what's right for your own family. And for us, we do live lots of hours away from any of our family. So we have 2 families here that basically are family to us and family to my kid, and like vice versa with their kids. And we just swap kids all the time. That we trust, like I would trust my husband when it comes to how they treat my kid. So we are a little bit more open with their family, I guess. But the flip side of that is sexual abuse is real. So again, you've got to also have talks with your kid about appropriate and not appropriate touching. If they're going to be around people, I'm not even going to say people who are not family. I'm going to say people outside of you and your husband. And even then, you probably should still have that talk with them. But if you're going to be around other people, other adults, that talk is just something you have to have. What we do with my daughter when we explain appropriate touching versus not appropriate, when it comes to the innocent stuff, okay, I'm talking all innocent stuff. Now, she knows what the not innocent stuff is. We've covered a little bit of that, but I'm talking innocent stuff. Like, for example, sitting on someone's lap. That's very innocent as a 6-year-old. And most adults, that's still very innocent to them. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's appropriate, not because it's anything bad, but it would make the other adult feel uncomfortable. Does that make sense? So we had the talk with her of, okay, if so-and-so's dad is sitting and watching a movie with all of you guys, and you're sitting on the couch, you know, with him like his kids are, that's perfectly fine. Now, don't crawl up in his lap, because my kid has been known to do that. She likes to cuddle. Not because there's anything wrong with it. You're not doing anything bad, but probably going to make him feel real uncomfortable. We had the talk when she was like 3. She used to run and give people like bear hugs, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Until you're at the height of a man's belt loop and you're doing that and he is real uncomfortable. You can tell by the red face that he has. She did that to a few of her teachers, and we had to have the talk of like, okay, so what we're going to do, we have no problem with you hugging your teachers. Again, you don't want to teach your kid that any physical touch is bad, especially if their love language is touching. But what we told her is like, we didn't explain to her like why it was awkward for the man. We didn't need to explain that. But we told her, we said, okay, so what you need to do is some people, they don't really like being touched. You know, some people it's just, they don't like it. So what you're going to do before you hug somebody, and we didn't say men, we said people. Again, you don't want to stereotype this either. We said if you're going to hug somebody, that looks fun. If you're going to hug somebody, just ask, can I have a hug? Because then what are they going to do? They're going to stoop down and they're going to hug your kid, and it's going to alleviate all awkwardness. So that was a talk that we had early on that we never would have thought to have that talk until we saw several times it happen, and we're like, these men are not comfortable with this. And I don't blame them. I wouldn't have been either. So we talked to your kids about appropriate and non-appropriate touching. And again, I'm not talking just wrong and right. I'm just talking about if it makes the other person very uncomfortable, I wouldn't consider that appropriate. And you know what? My husband is a prime example of this. He's not a toucher at all. Now, especially when it comes to other people's kids. Because, again, just the world that we live in, he's going to be above reproach on everything. He dressed up as Santa Claus one year for our church. The kids loved it. We went to each house individually. We delivered presents. It was so much fun. But he purposely did not sit down at anybody's house because he did at one house and the little boy jumped on his lap and he was like, okay, like we're getting up right now. Just because he is not a toucher anyways. And for someone else's kid to be jumping on his lap, he was like, nope, not doing this, not okay with this. And that's his right. And again, it's a safeguard. It's just a smart safeguard. When we do Santa, like my daughter knows my husband is Santa, but like that's how we portray it. Santa's like the parents and Jesus and, you know, but we do the fun stuff. We still take pictures with Santa and all that stuff. But even when it's allowed, she doesn't sit on his lap. We just have her stand by him or sit on the bench next to him. Now, if she really wanted to sit on his lap, I wouldn't be like, oh, nope, can't do that. But she doesn't really want to, and I'm never going to force her to sit on his lap. That's another thing. When it comes to touch, you let your child lead when it comes to, if they're not comfortable hugging somebody, don't make them hug somebody. You never want them to feel like they have to show an abundance of physical touch to be approved of, because that can be taken advantage of years later. That can be used in grooming if the child already has that in their head of like, well, it's not polite not to hug people. Now, I'm not saying, okay, hear me out. Some parents take it to the extreme where you go to shake their hand and they like they're rude about it. Okay, shaking your hand, that's not inappropriate, period. Teach your kids to speak when spoken to, have eye contact, and shake people's hands if they're going to be in a situation where that's normal. Like in the church life that we are in, that's normal. Not anymore. Let me see. Someone just texted me. Probably my husband. Did we get everything from groceries? All right, guys, 2 seconds. Make sure. I think he just got off work and he's making sure he doesn't need to run by the store. Y'all, freaking squirrel. I already lost my train of thought. Oh, we had handshaking time. So, no, it is not okay for you to refuse to shake people's hands because you're being a brat. That is not you feeling uncomfortable. You just don't want to do it. Okay, do you understand the difference? Like, don't force your kids to do something that they feel is not appropriate, but that doesn't mean you don't teach them to be respectful. And again, I'm gonna get canceled by at least one parent by saying that, but we were in a church where that was prevalent with a lot of kids, and the kids were just rude. Like they ran the household versus the parents running the household. And that was something that real quick, we were like, no, like we're not running our house like that. Oh, another just idea with school age kids. My brother-in-law is real good with this. So my brother-in-law and his wife, they adopted 3 little kids. And one thing they love to do, he specifically loves to do, is he'll go out and jump on the trampoline with them. They're all over each other. They're wrestling, they're jumping, they're falling down, they're getting picked up. There's plenty of physical touch going on without him having to walk up and just like hug, the preteen girl, which I'm sure he does. Again, it's his kid. There's nothing wrong with it. But if it was a man, and I don't know him that well. I don't know if he is comfortable with physical touch. If he was a man that wasn't, that's a perfect way to get plenty of physical touch in with your kids without feeling like you're getting physical touch in. Does that make sense? Respect is so overlooked. Yeah, respect is overlooked these days. You don't want to push your kid to do things that are not appropriate, but pushing them outside of their comfort zone, that tends to be rolled in with that. Like, oh, well, they don't want to do it. Okay, they don't want to do it because they don't want to do it, not because it could be inappropriate. They just don't want to do it. And that's where a lot of kids, again, run the home of, well, little so-and-so doesn't want to do it, so we're going to not do this. Little so-and-so doesn't like this class, so we're not going to make him go to it. And, again, we just see that a lot with parents our age. I think that's just a millennial thing. Okay. Also, during that middle of the road line with kids, 7, 8, 9, 10, they start smelling kind of funky, especially the boys, especially by the end of the day when they're done playing. But you can't let that affect you hugging and kissing on them at night when they're wanting to cuddle. Trust me, we had a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade Sunday school class, and there were lots of times where we're like, okay, so-and-so is clearly old enough to start using deodorant. We all know it by now. Because that's just, they're going through I don't know, they're not actually going through puberty at that age, I don't think, but they're developing whatever they're developing. I don't know. But they start smelling real funky. And the breath and I don't even know. My kid is 6 and she smells like something died in her mouth when she wakes up every morning. Like she comes and kisses me and I'm like, let's go brush your teeth right now. But in as much as I'm joking about it now, you don't really want to joke about that with your kids, especially if they're kids that are easily have not great self-esteem. You don't want to tell your preteen boy who struggles with fitting in and feeling accepted, like, ooh, you stink. Talk about hygiene. Do it in a polite, respectful way to your child, but you don't want to make him feel bad about it. Like, it's normal. We all stink. We all have body odor. We all went through those phases. Those of us as adults, most of us, we're just better at hiding it now. We still stink. We just get better at figuring out how to mask that. So then your last age group is 5th grade through middle school. And that is where, just kidding, 5th grade, yeah, 5th grade through middle school. Just kidding. I guess there's 4. Just kidding. There's 4 groups. I don't even know. 5th grade through middle school. That is where really your boys are, most of your boys are pulling back. And you got to get creative about the touching. And then teenagers and a little older, that's when they're kind of like growing into themselves and more confident, and they're okay like hugging mom again. But 5th through middle school, yeah, you're just going to have to deal with some awkwardness. And I'll tell you another story. Because again, we had Sunday school class for years with this age. There was one boy in particular who would come up and hug me all the time. Now, he only actually hugged me, I think, twice, because then I caught on and I would see him coming. I'm like, oh no, we're going to high five. Because, again, safeguards. That was not, he wasn't doing anything inappropriate. But at his height, him coming and giving me a bear hug made me feel very uncomfortable. And again, as a teacher, you just put up the safeguards before anything can happen. So we put up the safeguards of, okay, we're going to high five. Like, I still wanted to give him that physical touch, but there's a limit to what is appropriate and not appropriate. And there's a line. And as they start getting older, that I feel like that line can be misconstrued by them more than it probably should be. So at first I didn't understand this. I honestly thought the kid was a little weird. I was like, he is so touchy-feely. Like, that's weird to me. But after seeing him interact with his mom on multiple occasions, like, she would literally pull him to his lap and like let him sit on her lap. My first instinct again was like, that's kind of odd. But if she did that to her 5th grade daughter, I would have not thought anything of it. So we need to stop putting that stigma out there of boys not being able to be loved by their moms the same as girls can. Okay, I had to preach to myself on that one. And so then I realized he's not weird. His love language is touch. It's very evident to anyone who knows him. Touch and words of affirmation. This kid was like a walking textbook for both of those. But his mom is raising him to eventually be an adult man who knows how to love his family and not think that hugging his son is going to be weird. So I was the one who, my own condition as a child was coming through on that, thinking that that was weird, because I was taught that boys were sissies when they like to hug and do the lovey-dovey stuff with moms. That was like subconsciously pounded into us with our family. Not by my mom, but by other members that I won't call out on here. So that was odd to me. But she was raising her son to be a good dad and a good father, dad and father, same thing. A good dad and a good husband, and be very well-rounded, versus thinking that you can't touch, boys without them being sissies. So when I saw that, and I kind of put everything together, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But there is a huge double standard with boys and girls, especially when they start getting older. So anyways, same thing when it comes to just ideas. Rub their back, wrestle with them. If they want to sit and cuddle with you at night, let them, or in the morning, whenever. But at night when they're tired, that's when you get a little bit more love from your preteens, because their guard is kind of down and they're like, oh, like, I don't hate mom after all. And then if you are dealing with other people's kids, do have the safeguards up. One of the safeguards we had is you're never alone with a kid, ever. If you're alone with a kid, it's with the door open where, like, there's other people out that can actually see you, like, at all times. I remember at one point I was tutoring a 6th or 7th grade girl, I don't remember now. But we were tutoring up in a room that was secluded from everything else. So even with the door open, it didn't matter. Like, there's no one that's going to be witnessing anything. So I had another teenage girl that was an 11th grader. So she was much older, respected. Like, I knew that if anything ever was accused, that her testimony would stand, to be in there and be the witness, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so she would sit in the corner and just read a book while I tutored this girl. I was accused of something. Nothing like that was going to put me in jail. Nothing about inappropriate touch or anything. But I was accused of basically teaching this girl something or saying something to her that she wasn't supposed to know. And the parents freaked out. And then real quick, it was discredited. All they had to do is ask the teenage girl. She's like, no, like, she didn't say any of that. What happened was this little girl asked me a question of something she heard at school. I told her, you need to ask your mom. That's something, that's for your mom to discuss with you. And that was the end of it. The problem is she did ask her mom. And her parents freaked out on her for asking a question about something inappropriate. And it came out that, oh, well, Miss Tanya said to ask you. I did, because you asked me. And so the teenager was able to, my testimony was still intact. However, I did not know that the relationship between that mom and daughter was so strained that they couldn't have an open conversation like that. And it did end up turning into a little bit of a messy situation. I won't say awful, because it wasn't awful, but it was easier to say, well, you're teaching my kid inappropriate things, than to say, okay, there's an issue within my home that I need to fix so we can move on and this doesn't happen again. But had that teenage girl not been in there, I honestly feel like it could have gotten much worse than it already did. So set up safeguards. And one of those is when you're with other people's kids, especially in like a teaching setup or whatever, where again, you're not eating dinner at these parents' houses. You're not buddy-buddy with them. And even if you are, just safeguards are good. But don't be in a room alone with somebody else's child. It's just a smart habit to get into. Just like I wouldn't be in a room alone with some other man. If anything was ever a he said, she said, I want it to be clear that my word is good and that there's other people that can back that story up. So you just want to be smart. And then when they get to be teenagers, this is where it gets real tricky, because you get the mood swings, right? One day they're loving all over you. The next day, like, oh, mom, don't touch me. So if you look for ways to love your kid, you'll find them. That's honestly all that there is to it. I already gave you all the same ideas. Like, all the same ideas work for older kids. And then if your kids are in sports, one thing that I worked with a teenage girl. I was in college, so I don't know how long ago that was. But one thing she said, she was in volleyball. Her dad would work out her calf muscles almost every night because she would get cramps. That's a great way to show your daughter that you love them via physical touch, even if you're not comfortable with a lot of physical touch, right? And teen girls, they have it the hardest, in my opinion, because teen girls, they need that physical touch from their dad, even if that's not their primary love language. That's how God designed them. If they don't get it, they go and they try to get physical touch from other men. Now, I'm not saying like they go become a Jezebel, okay? But I'm just saying in their relationships as they get older, even if they're good girls and they keep, all the rules that you set for them, they end up not having the greatest relationship when it comes to physical touch and love and how the two correlate. I'll just put it that way. And guys, I was one of those, by the way. I don't know if you watched my episode, the last one. I talked about how I thought my love language was touch, but in reality, it's just because I had such a deficit in the touch department that I was trying to fill that void real quick, and then finally realized it's not even my love language. So my husband and I had to have lots of long talks with that, because I was someone who didn't grow up with a dad, didn't grow up with that physical touch. So I went and I looked for it. Now I didn't make good choices. I did act out. I did rush into relationships real quick when I was a teenager because I was craving that love. I know now that wasn't love. It was me trying to fill a void. But for me, as a teenager, I thought that was them showing me love. So it's something that if you have a teenage daughter, you have a duty to make sure that emotional tank is filled when it comes to physical touch, so they don't look for it in other places. And again, hugs and kisses. Guys, it's not wrong. You can hug your teenage daughter. Rubbing out sore muscles. Again, the volleyball story. Like, a lot of your kids are in sports. That's a great way to show physical touch. So, yes, thank you. So if you guys share it, you are in the Amazon drawing. I forgot to mention that earlier. Sorry. If you share, just draw a comment, shared, and I'll make sure you get in the drawing. So I'm going to go work out because I haven't done that yet today. It is a blizzard outside. So I'm going to go into my gym, or not my gym, into the garage, which I have like weights set up. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys got some value out of this.